Starting off with Python, there's going to be a few things that we're going to want to download to get our development environment set up to be able to work. So the two things that I'm going to have downloaded onto my computer to work with Python is going to be the actual Python interpreter, which can be found on Python's official website. I'll put a link to this into the description of the video as well. And then we also have what's called an IDE, or Integrated Development Environment. This is sort of a tool that will help us with like highlighting syntax and completing syntax and all of this sort of idea. The one that I like to use is called PyCharm. You can really use whatever IDE you feel most comfortable with. If you've done some programming before and you use things like, I don't know, like Eclipse or IntelliJ or those sort of tools, feel free to use whatever IDE you feel most comfortable with. But I'll be demonstrating things in PyCharm because that's the one that I typically use. So you're going to want to download these two tools, and I've already got them downloaded on my computer, and we're going to go ahead and install them each. So I'll install the interpreter for Python first. You'll see when we install this, there are a few different options. I recommend adding Python into your path variables. What this will do is it will allow you to be able to access the Python interpreter from your command line. It just makes it a bit more convenient to work with if you add it onto your path. So I'll go ahead and hit install now, and it will install all of the pieces of the Python interpreter. Now, in modern Python like 3.8.2, it will come with a number of different tools such as pip, which we'll discuss a little bit about as well in this video series. But yeah, it comes with a lot of different tools as well as the interpreter, which allows us to actually write Python code. Now, there are other versions of Python that are common. Most used would be Python 2.7. This is also often used, but it's not supported anymore. It's been brought to end of life. So I prefer to talk about Python 3 because it's the most modern and still in support version of Python. If you're planning to use Python 2, it's very similar to Python 3 with some small syntactical differences. So even installing Python 3 will help you with understanding Python 2 as well. So either or, you'll be able to write Python code in either of the two major versions pretty seamlessly. So now that this setup is successful, I'm going to go ahead and run the PyCharm installer as well. With this, there isn't really anything special that you really have to do with this. You can just hit next, install it to the default locations. I typically like to associate it with the .py files, just because that way I can double click on a py file and open it in PyCharm. And then we'll just go ahead and click through install. So while this is installing, I'll just demonstrate. If we go into our command line, you should be able to just type in Python now, and it should launch you into the Python interpreter here. So inside of here, we can actually type whatever Python code we want, and we'll be able to actually run code directly from command line if we want to. It's a lot easier to type it into a file and then run it, but just to sort of like demonstrate, if you type in something like this, so print, and then in quotations, hello world, this is very like basic sort of output. So what this will do is it will print whatever you put inside of the brackets onto the screen. So you see when I press enter here, it will just say hello world. So this is just some basic Python to show you that the Python is actually working as installed and that you're able to access it through command line. So our IDE here is finished. So let's come back to this. I'm just going to go ahead and launch it just to get it all set up and demonstrate to you how we can run things through the actual PyCharm environment as well. So I'm going to say do not import settings. I don't have any settings that I want to import. The UI theme that you use is really up to you. I like to use the dark theme. You could use the light theme as well, whatever you prefer. There are a few different plugins that are available. We don't really need any of these to be working with Python, so we'll just leave those as is. And then from here, the IDE should launch. And what we'll do is, once we launch the IDE, we'll just go ahead and we'll do a similar sort of thing as this. We'll just like create a print statement. We'll test it, see that it actually prints, make sure that the IDE is all up and running. Once you've got that all up and running, you'll be able to work with Python and follow along with these tutorials and learn all of the things that you're able to learn inside of Python. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a new folder here. I usually work in C source, and then I put the programming language's name in it. That's my preference. So you really put this folder anywhere on your computer. I'm just going to call mine tutorials. And this will be sort of where all my Python code will go. So when I create a new project here, I'm going to put it inside of this directory here. So I'll put it inside of this directory. Now, what it will do is it will create a new virtual environment for you. And essentially a virtual environment is just sort of like an environment that's specific to the actual program that you're writing itself. What's nice about this is that you can sort of bundle whatever pieces of Python you want to package with it. So you can like import specific packages through pip or something like that, and only sort of have those packages available in one project, and another project might not use them, so it won't have them. So it allows you to sort of like separate out what's included in each different program, and sort of lets you treat them as like an individual program rather than everything accessing the same interpreter. What you should see here is that this base interpreter should point to something with python.exe at the end of it. Since we added it into our path variable, it should be able to pick up on that automatically. And then once we click create, it should create our project for us. So you'll see it will go through all the pieces of creating the virtual environment, and then a lot of times it'll give you these tips. I like to say don't show the tips because I'm just familiar with PyCharm. You may want to keep them enabled if you want to see the different tips that exist for it. It will give you some like interesting ideas of what sort of things you can do inside of this IDE. I'll try to show off some of those now as we're working in here and give you a lot of the things that are sort of valuable to be able to use just sort of starting up with PyCharm. So what you'll see is you'll see the folder that we've created here on the left-hand side. And inside of here, we can create a new source code file. So to do this, we right-click on the folder, we go under New, and then we go into Python file. And then we can create a Python file and give it whatever name we'd like. I'm just going to call this one Hello World. And you'll see what it will do is it will create this blank file. Now what we can do is we can do something similar to what we did before, where we just like print and then in double quotes hello world. And then we can run this in the same way that we ran the previous one. So I can sort of like right click here and press run hello world. There's also this plus button up here that will allow you to run it. So either or will work. And you'll see we'll get a similar output to what we did running it through command line. We'll get this hello world output. So this shows you that the IDE is working as well as the command line is working too. One final thing that I'll show you here just to sort of give you a bit more of an idea of how we can run Python programs is that inside of command line, what we can actually do is we can navigate to the directory where this Python file exists. So for instance, if I'll exit out of here. And I'm going to cd to the directory where I have my Python code. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in Python, and then I'm going to put the name of the Python file. What this will do is it'll allow you to run a Python file through command line, and you can see that you get the result when you run that. So there's a few different ways that you can run Python that you should know about. If you type in just Python, it will bring you right into the interpreter where you can type a line of code and it will execute it sort of line by line as you type. Another way that you can do it is you can type in Python and then give it a file that is a Python file, and then it will run that and output it to the screen or do whatever that file was meant to do, right? And then the third way is directly through the IDE. You can write your code and then either right click and click run and then or press the play button up here, and then that will run it in this window here. You'll see as we worked with the IDE that it's one of the more preferable places to work with because we can do a lot of debugging inside of it that isn't really possible through command line or through some of the other ways of running Python. So an IDE gives us a lot of value. It also will highlight syntax and point out syntax errors and that sort of thing as we're going. So it's typically the preferred way to work with Python, but if you ever need to just like run a script quickly, the command line methods are also very valuable. So this gives you a sort of brief introduction, gets you your development environment set up, and in the next lesson, we'll take a look at how to actually do some different programming inside of Python. We'll take a look at things like variables, we'll learn a bit about like different decision structures and repetition structures that exist. And by the end of this, you'll have a good foundational knowledge of programming in general, as well as how to program in Python. And you'll be able to take those skills and develop them further. And as I make more videos on different computer science topics, you'll be able to apply these skills to those different topics and soon enough have a good understanding of the world of programming.